Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Clarisse Fortuné and these are the headlines. South Africa's fragile unity government was shaken again this Wednesday after the country's second largest political party broke with partners and voted against the national budget. Residents in Goma are still struggling to get hold of cash as banks remain closed 2 months after the M23 rebel group seized the eastern DR Congo city. In a Jola community spanning southern Senegal, the Gambia and Guinea-Bissau, ancestral rituals and belief are part of their identity, practices and a way of life that are now threatened by modernity. It took weeks of negotiations and tensions in South Africa before the national budget was finally approved. It passed with 194 votes in favour and 182 against. The Democratic Alliance, a key coalition partner, voted against the measure, raising questions about the stability of the unity government formed after the African National Congress lost its parliamentary majority last year. Tom Kennedy reports from Cape Town.
Now, after a couple of tense weeks here in South Africa, the budget has passed, but the main coalition partner, the DA, voted against it. Now, that was after a compromise was made by the ANC and the finance minister over a proposed goods and services tax, which the DA opposed, but that compromise wasn't enough in the end. And over the last couple of days, as tensions have risen between the DA and the ANC has managed to convince other parties like Action SA to get on board and help them pass this budget. Now, that could be reflective of the ANC not necessarily needing the Democratic Alliance in this governing coalition. And during this whole time, this week in fact, President Cyril Ramaphosa has said, as tensions boil with the DA, that the DA should reconsider their position in the GNU if they do vote against this budget. At the same time, Action SA, who originally did not join the GNU, have since said that they are in fact keen to join. So this could be reflective of a potential reshuffle of this governing coalition over the next couple of days. Wednesday evening, the DA are going to hold talks within the party to discuss their fate, whether they will remain in the GNU or not. So we'll have more information on what the future governing coalition in South Africa will look like Thursday.
Tom Kennedy reporting there and staying in South Africa with a case that made headlines in the country. A Nigerian televangelist accused of raping and sexually assaulting several young women from his church, with victims as young as 14 years old. After spending 8 years in jail, a court has now found him not guilty of all charges. The reason, the judge said prosecutors mishandled the case, that the accused were not sufficiently cross-examined by the state. Timothy Umotoso's co-accused were also found not guilty. The trial was the first prominent rape case to be broadcast live in a country where sexual violence is rampant. According to police figures, more than 42,000 rapes were reported in South Africa last year. Now to Goma in eastern DR Congo. Banks are still closed more than 2 months after the M23 rebels and Rwandan forces captured the city. Cash is in short supply and the local economy severely hit. Aurélie Bazara, Kibongula and Fidel Kitsa report from Goma.
In Goma, iron gratings are drawn over the entrances of commercial banks. Since M23 rebels captured the city in late January, the Congolese government has cut links with local financial institutions. Cash is now extremely difficult to come by.
Since the banks closed, the dollar has disappeared. All we see are Congolese and Rwandan francs. We don't exchange many dollars anymore. We suffer because everything is normally done with dollars, and the exchange rate has exploded. It's a real loss.
Informal currency traders like Eve, as well as shopkeepers, are the hardest hit. Paying by cash is still the rule in Goma. In this market in the city centre, customers are few and far between, and traders are struggling to stay afloat. Fida hasn't sold a single vegetable since the morning.
The customers aren't there like they used to be. We come to the market every morning to display our product, but at the end of the day, we haven't even sold 100 Congolese francs. There are no customers. There's an abundance of agricultural produce, but there's no money in circulation, so customers can't buy our products. This penalizes us.
Civil servants in the province of North Kivu have been affected too. They get their salaries by bank transfer, but they've lost access to their accounts.
It's become complicated to live. So it's our contacts, people who are helping us, who are in Kinshasa or in other provinces, not taken over by the M23. When we talk to them, they're always willing to help us with the smallest of things, and that's what helps us to get by for the time being.
The Congolese authorities say that they're looking at possible solutions, such as transferring money via mobile phones. The problem has hit all areas occupied by the M23. There are also cash shortages in the neighbouring province of South Kivu since the M23 and Rwandan forces seized the provincial capital, Bukavu.
In Niger, dozens of former government officials and military officials have been released from detention following the 2023 coup. But one not included, former President Mohamed Bazoum. He remains in custody. The releases follow recommendations from Niger's National Reform Conference. The military junta says this is part of its plan to transition the country back to democratic rule. Just days ago, junta leader General Abdurrahman Chani was sworn in for a 5-year transition period under a new charter that replaces the previous constitution. The USAID cuts resulting from Donald Trump's suspension of funding are not only hurting direct beneficiaries, but also threatening the very foundation of Kenya's cities. Jobs are at risk. Businesses across sectors are struggling to survive. This crisis highlights just how deeply American assistance is embedded in Kenya's economy. In Nairobi, Olivia Bizot went to see the impact of this measure on small businesses.
I'm outside a restaurant near the USAID and UN offices in Nairobi's Gigiri neighbourhood. It's around midday, and this space would normally be bustling with activity. But since US President Donald Trump suspended USAID funding, it's incredibly quiet. At what should be peak hour, the restaurant is basically empty. Many businesses in the area are struggling. It's clear evidence of just how deeply American aid is woven into Kenya's economy.
Our entire ecosystem has been now built around this kind of a community. So how are we going to, or how are we supposed to function without 60% of our ecosystem or our community? Eventually, people will start be getting laid off if things go the way they are, especially if an inflation hits and people do not have the spending power to be able to come to restaurants. Restaurants are not going to be able to pay their rent, they're not going to be able to pay their staff.
The impact of these aid cuts extends far beyond empty restaurants. Startups that depended on US funding are at risk, healthcare programs face shutdowns, and thousands of jobs are on the line. With fewer expats, Nairobi's high-end real estate market is slowing, and analysts warn the Kenyan shilling could weaken. For Kenya, US aid wasn't just about assistance, it was an economic driver. Now, businesses, workers, and entire industries are left facing an uncertain future.
Now, let's take you to the heart of Casamance in southern Senegal. Efforts are underway to preserve the centuries-old culture of the Jola people. Ancestral rituals and beliefs are a way of life, but are now threatened by modernity. Senegal's first museum dedicated to Jola heritage is reopening its doors after years of restoration. Locals, tourists, and our correspondents went to discover the fascinating culture.
In the heart of Casamance's sacred forest sits Ma'an Sibile Sambou, the king of the Jola community in Mlop, a village 500 kilometers south of Senegal's capital.
In the whole kingdom, no one can dress like me. My broom, which I always carry, is my weapon and represents the unity of our Jola people.
The Jola people are preserving ancestral tradition by cultivating rice and keeping community gardens filled with fruit and vegetables. The king has been working to preserve local farming techniques since 2020. One way is by giving local women this farmland to tend.
Our culture is based on sacredness and secrets, and its foundation is the sacred forests. We practice our rites and sacrifices there, like asking God for lots of rain to grow rice as the winter approaches, so we owe it to ourselves to protect them.
These circular structures are emblematic of Jola architecture. With funnel-shaped roofs, the buildings allow rainwater to be collected whilst regulating the inside temperature. Around 10 of these structures remain in the region, one of which has been restored to its original state.
It's entirely natural, entirely ecological, because there's a real effort to use materials that are found directly on site, and to adapt to the environment, because Casamance is a region where it rains a lot.
The structure is also home to the Jola Culture Museum. Around 40 objects are displayed here, most used for rituals. Each piece carries a history of the ancient people.
Our ancestors lived here, our fathers, and now we're starting to lose it. I did this so that we can preserve it, and so our children will try to preserve it too. That way our animist religion won't disappear.
For its first exhibition, the museum focuses on spirituality, agriculture, and the role of women in Jola culture.
The fascinating culture of the Jola community to conclude our edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching. More news coming up.